Guys, welcome to Comfy Cozy Up. So here I am to talk about books that I read in April. April was the least amount of books that I've read in a while, but let me tell you, these 4 books that I read were amazing. At least 2 of them will be on my top 10 for the year, at least. Now, I picked these books up randomly, and there was only one book that I definitely said I'm going to read this month, which is, a Charles Dickens classic. So all the other books were, for the most part, most of the books I read were classic, except for one new release. And that new release is Don't Cry for Me, Daniel Black. This was a 5-star read. Absolutely a 5-star read. But this is also a book that I think is a personal read. I think because this book is surrounding parenting and relationship between a parent and a child, I think your own beliefs and how you think a parent should be or behavior wise, you might have a different experience with this book. But because the author took such a strong emotional story and wrote it in a way that it's like an apology story. This is about a man who is he is dying, and he is writing his life, his history, everything that it is about him, as far as what he knows about his parents, what he knows within himself that he did, and what he regretted and what he could have done differently, his love for his child, his love for the woman that he had his child with. And you really get into the nitty-gritty of what you hope that someone who has done their child wrong would say and express in this story. Now, people like I with that had daddy issues, this is kind of the apology that you want. That whole laid out there, acknowledge you're wrong and be truthful of how you feel about certain situation that you didn't want. Because oftentimes parents want you as a child to live out their dreams, to live out their goals, and your child oftentimes don't want the same dreams and the goals that you have. And how you react to it is what is going to either hurt the relationship or grow the relationship or have some kind of positive impact. In this case, it was a negative impact because the child in this case did not go the route, did not have the lifestyle that he wanted. And there's that resentment and that thing that he put off what he didn't get onto his child. I did a blog review on this because I talked about generational trauma, and it's very much in this story. That's the wind, guys. That's the wind. It is windy for the last couple of days. So this is where you get that generational trauma in this story, and you see how it's broken down and how it's just keep going from one generation to another. And I really was so wrapped up in this story, and I was like, this damn author gonna name it Don't Cry for Me. And I'm like, this is a tearjerker. This is one where you're telling yourself not to cry, because you feel so much emotional response to each character in this, the father, the son, and the mother in this. And it's amazing. I can really go on and on about this, but just know that I think different people is going to have different experience with this based on their personal view on what makes a parent a good parent, that kind of deal. Then I picked up on Harlem Renaissance. Yes, so I did Plum Bun, and this is Jessie Redmond Fawcett. You guys know her. She is the queen of the Harlem Renaissance. She's the one that nurtured and put a lot of our greats on the map. And I was wanted to read this, but I was at first the font wasn't my cup of tea. But be honest with you guys, because y'all know I've been having eye issue here and there. Sometimes it's really back to normal now. That the font actually worked out in my favor, because I did download the ebook to this because I know they have an ebook, and I started reading it, and then I went and started reading. I said, oh, this is not so bad after all, because the font is a little bigger, and the print is very dark. So this is before Passing. Passing by Nella Lawson. This book was published before that. So this is a passing story, but this is more of a true ending, more of a story that gives you a different take on passing, with, even though it says without a novel without a morale right here, you get that in this, because this is a passing of someone who's passing but aware of the consequence and all the things that's happening to them in the midst of that. So this is about a young girl who is not aware of that she was a passing as a young age. Her mother is very much passing, her father is not, and they have two kids, her and her sister. Her sister cannot pass. Her sister clearly looked black, but she is passing. So she saw what kind of privilege her mother had versus her father. So when her parents passed, she wanted to live that life where she didn't have to think about what comes with being black. So she moved to New York City from Philly and was living passing. Now, she's experiencing things that she never thought about that white women experience in that era, in terms of, you know, if you read a lot of those books in that Harlem Renaissance era, a lot of even the white women were subjected to, treated like a piece of meat, and went through some things, especially if you are in the art world or the jazz world or that kind of situation. They experience that. But then there's also the matter of the heart, and how do you keep up passing if you get involved with a man. And that idea comes up in this as well as her sister. Now her sister's also decided to go to there in New York, but if you're passing, you can't really associate with someone who is black, because that will give you away, or you deal with the consequence of being found out. In this case, they use her talent as a way of her having to choose. She's an artist, and she got an opportunity, and there was someone else with that opportunity, and that opportunity became an issue because of their skin color. And she is well passing, so they were unaware, and she had to make a tough decision in this. And I think that's one of the things I liked about this, because a lot of the passing stories that we read, there's always that life goes on. These people made that decision, they lost a lot, but life goes on. Or there's that open ending where you have to kind of figure out what direction certain things went. In this story, she gave you that proper ending. She gave you that old idea that not everyone passing story just went on. There's some that had to make tough decisions and sacrifices in order to keep their morale, in order to have a heart in that situation where they're not neglecting their family and everything that makes them who they are. Especially in this book, where she's a character where she saw love between her mother and her father, love that even in death they could not separate, and she saw that kind of love and wanted that kind of love, the whole idea of marriage and love that her parents had. But you have to have honesty in that in order to get that, and living in a lifestyle that you thought was going to be your saving grace became complicated in this story. Absolutely love this. I think she's an author that a lot of people should be reading and they don't read, and I don't know how people are not talking about her books, but she really bring that passing issue in this in another way that I haven't read yet, because all the other passing stories have that certain kind of take on it versus this one. Then I wanted to read a Caribbean book, and Madame Trial, Patricia Powell. And this one is very much a traditional in terms of Caribbean stories that we've been reading lately. But this was done early. This was done in 1993, was the published year. And the storyline is in the 60s and 70s in this. And we have a woman who's in an abusive marriage. And she is struggling to get what she wants in terms of her career, and just to have some form of her and not losing herself. But she has multiple kids with this man. And in one of her discretion where she felt for it, she had an affair and ended up with a child that is not her husband. And she is now torn between certain things, where her children are separated. She is pursuing her career and going to get her education. And in the story, you are getting her point of view, but then you also getting the point of view of that child who's not really sure of her own identity and is in certain circumstances where her siblings' relationship and things that she's learning about herself. It is a complicated story because this is another flawed parent, and you get that in all the books that I've read this month. Flawed parents, and this is another one where she's making bad decisions and it's impacting her children, and you see that, but then also you don't know how to really take her as a mother because she's not abandoning them. She's still doing what she can, but what she feels is the right thing is also very questionable in this. I thought this was such a good Caribbean tale. It does have immigration in it, but it also has that idea of your value and how do you feel about yourself, because she constantly will go back to this man who was not good for her, who everyone in her family is encouraging her to leave, and yet still she often goes back to that. There's other men that has come in her life that were positive, but she didn't. It's kind of like going back to that drug that you know it's not good for you, but you're going back to it. That kind of deal in this story, which was very frustrating when you're reading it. But it had that realistic tale. It's like you know somebody who's like that. You've heard stories of some parents that were like that kind of deal. And I think that's why this book was such a good read. It is very much an emotional read at times because it talks about sexuality in an era that, you know, in the Caribbean that was not not a thing to even talk about publicly, and how your parents might really react when they find out what your sexuality is not what they consider the norm, that kind of deal. It's in the story, and I thought this was really good, and it's a backlist, and it makes me really enjoying reading some of these backlist Caribbean stories. And then the last book, yeah, David Copperfield. Let me tell you, I was reading, going to this, and I'm thinking to myself, no, Nicholas Nickleby is still my favorite. And then this came along, and when I got to the end, I'm not reading, I'm thinking to myself, oh, it's giving David Copperfield a run for it. Nicholas Nickleby a run for his money. Sorry. Absolutely fantastic. Masterpiece. He was really in his element. There's certain chapters that I felt, oh, this man was having a good old time writing that chapter. This is a story about a man telling his life story, his experiences, his family background, his trial and tribulation, the matters of the heart. And you get to really see the impact a mother can have on a man, and his choices in women, and how he see the world, and tragedy, how he handled tragedy in his life. And in this case, he is a young boy in the story that never knew his father. His father passed away before he was born. And his mother, you are talking about an era where a lot of women could not see themselves being single, being the single mother. And you have men that would prey on women like that. In this case, this man preyed on her, got into her life, married her, brought his wretched his sister with him, and basically abused his mother as well as David Copperfield in this story. And you are seeing how this little boy is passing through life. He is now, having to see his mother being treated ill will, having himself also going through it. At times he does not really have to defend himself. Sometimes, he had to use his teeth one moment, which had consequence. But there's boarding school in this, because Charles Dickens liked the boarding school thing, but this one was a little different because it shows you the friendship that he was able to attain over the years because of that experience he had, that brief experience at the boarding school. Then you have his aunt that is amazing in the story. I mean, in the beginning, you kind of want to squeeze the woman's neck because she had a thing where she wanted a girl, and he just happened to want a boy, and that was an issue for her. But over the, when you read the page, you start to really appreciate this woman's feistiness and how she defends her family and people in her life, and she has that tough exterior that you can see in the storyline, but then as you read, you kind of learn a lot about her personal life and maybe what really made her had that like tough exterior in the beginning of the book. But there's all these interesting characters that Charles Dickens always write. And there's, those the wretched ones that will try to swindle money from people and try to take their fortune. Then you have those loving character that are very quirky, but you kind of really like those character, And there's a lot of women in this that I thought was amazing as far as his aunt. There's Peggy, the woman who basically helped raise him as a kid in the house. She was a help in the house. And her mixed blend family, where it's that chosen family setting. And you have three women. You have a woman called Emily that he grew up with her, and there's that bond and that love that they share. And she tragically made a really bad decision that also involved him in a little way, and how that family, there's this person that really would do anything to get her, to save her. Because back then, if you did certain things as a woman, that is your reputation that's ruined. Then you have to just deal with the consequence of not being around your family, because you might even impact your family by the things that you do. That we have the woman who eventually became his wife in this story, and that connection that woman have with his mother. You can see where things went wrong, and that idea of saving someone, and basically living with the flaws of some things that you never noticed before, because there's that whole idea of saving. You didn't save your mother. You couldn't save your mother. You was a child. So that you can see that in her storyline with Doris. And then you have, not Dora. Then you have Agnes, and that is the woman that was also a childhood friend that looked at as his sister, and that love. And I love how in this that there is a bit of a love triangle, but it's done in a way that you're not going to be feeling some kind of way, because sometimes that love triangle can come off such a negative way in stories. But in this one, he carefully crafted this story in a way that it was such a beautiful love that you felt and you understood because of the time and the sacrifice, and especially on the woman's part, and how she had to be there for him and not share her own feelings towards what was happening. And it's just so many things in this book. There's a lot of drama, but there's so many things in the book that made me smile, that made me feel like, yes, he just gave everything I wanted. He's just like, just give it to me, that kind of deal. This is a chunky book, but again, this is also a book that don't feel chunky and long, because it's just always something happening. And I appreciate this edition. Again, I am a Penguin Random House Classic edition, for the black edition fan, because I feel like these are so much easier to read and to really get caught up in. There's so many quotes that I love. Of course, I talked about in another video, procrastination is a killer of time. I love that quote in this. And of course, the infamous, who the cap fit, let them wear it. That's in this. And there's other quotes that, a lot of times you hear, you forget, oh, that is an old Dickens quote, quote, but that people have used over the years, but you don't remember that it was, that you have in this. There is that writing style where you felt the emotion. You felt when a character is angry, and or it's a character is getting, things are happening and how it is. There's one particular chapter where he kept saying the guy's last name, and I was like cracking up, because You can tell like it's saying with a passion, how it's written, that you like, oh God, if I hear heat one more time, but you laughing at the same time because it's just like that part of the story was just interesting, and where you're just fist pumping because you know the person is getting it sucked to him. But there's so many elements of this story that you can really go on and talk about, and it just makes me appreciate Charles Dickens' writing even more. You know, he is of that era where there's certain things that might, you might scratch your head like, Lord, did he really write that in a story? But at the same time, he is really good at crafting story, at knowing when to move on to certain things and not drag on to something that too long. Because especially when there is that part with the boarding school, I thought it was going to be another one where it's just like a Nicholas Nickleby, where it's just going to drag on for a while, and it didn't. And I really was like, oh, so you can't really predict where the story was going, because he didn't stay too long in one kind of storyline. He just kept moving on, and you just kind of going on with the journey with this. There is a bit of an action-packed part at the end that I liked. There is, there's quite a few deaths in this as well, and you see how differently he mourns in this. And the main character is also a writer. So that part of the story, you could see how Charles Dickens wrote this in a way that you can tell like he used some of his emotion in this story. This is one of those, like, if he was alive, you just would have so many questions to ask his inspiration and how he came up with certain things. I am a Dickens girl. I absolutely love this. This is my 9th Dickens, and I can't wait to pick up number 10. I don't have a number 10 yet, but it's definitely going to be going through all his book eventually. My goal is to read every single book that he's ever published. And I am really, 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 really happy about this Chunky Beast. It was amazing. So that is all the books that I have. I don't know what I want to read yet. Actually, no, I do. I'm reading a more lighter book now, but I do have some more other books that I really want to read for this month, and keep on going through some of my Harlem Renaissance book as well, and some more classic. I think I have 2 classics that's on this shelf over here that I haven't read yet. So we're going to keep reading classics, guys, and a few new releases here and there. So let me know if you've read any of these books, what's your thoughts, and also what was your favorite book that you read in April. And I will see you in the next one. Yay! Alright, guys, bye.